Great. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I've participated in many NAF meetings, and I'm really pleased to see how active the organization is. So my hat is off to the board and the members of the administration of the committee that has organized this event. I think it's phenomenal. So we've got the wrong slides up. So if you could switch to the next talk. Otherwise, I'll have to give Dr. Uz's talk, and it's going to be really quite a challenge. It'll be an adventure for us all. So this, I believe, is me, and I will see if it behaves. I'm pretty sure I'm hitting the right button. Oh, I see. It's just very good. There we are. So this is supposed to be a summary of what you've heard, and we've been doing a lot of summaries, so I put this together in a way that is meant to give you some take-home messages for the overall meeting. I think we've all heard a lot. It's very, very exciting, but we need to kind of begin to summarize, just where we are and where we're going. So there's the NAF's disclaimer that they don't agree with anything that I'm saying, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what that says. Here are my disclosures. So I have worked with a couple of companies to develop some treatments that we're excited about, most of which I'm not going to be talking about, and have research support from the companies as well as NIH and the MDA. So finding a cure, I mean, that's what we're all kind of geared towards, but I want to kind of take us a step back from that. I think we need to be excited about finding a treatment. So if we can find some treatments, I think that's going to be a move in the right direction and might be a little less lofty and a more achievable goal. But finding a treatment itself is not going to be easy. It takes a lot. So what do we need to develop a treatment for ataxia? Well, we need to organize patients, clinicians, investigators, and drug companies. Well, that's hopefully moving forward. We also need to diagnose the ataxia. We need to understand it. We need to manage it optimally so that when we start a new treatment, we actually have some hope of seeing whether or not we're impacting it. We need to find the treatment. We need to have a means of evaluating the biology of the treatment in patients. Does it actually do what it's designed to do? And then does it actually affect your life? The FDA is not going to approve things just because it looks like it affects a molecule. It actually has to affect your life. So we have to have ways of doing all of these things. These aren't straightforward. So how long is it going to take? And I think it's also important for us to be realistic about this, because while we're very, very excited about this, there are intrinsic times that it takes to get these things out the door. So the goal here is to develop something so that when Dr. Perlman or Dr. Wilmot or I are in clinic and we write a prescription, we can give it to somebody and you can get the drug. Well, how long is it going to take before we get there? We need to get into a phase 1 trial. That will take anywhere from 6 months to a year to get that done. And we need to accomplish that before we can move on to a phase 2 trial. A phase 2 trial is really designed to make sure we pick the right dose, that we're having the kind of effect that we expect to have, that we're not having any additional issues with toxicity. We have to get through that phase 2 trial before we can get into the phase 3 trial, which is what we need to do to prove that people are actually better with this approach, with this drug. So if you add these years up, you can see that if we start tomorrow, it's going to take us 5 years before we have something that I can write a prescription for. So I don't mean to put a damper on this. I want to just make sure we're realistic about it, because when you come back next year and we don't have a drug to write a prescription for, I want you to understand why. We are getting incredibly close. We think we have some compounds that look really, really promising, but we have a lot of work to do. So we have a lot of work to do. which gave me a little bit of a pause when I saw this being the title for the meeting. So, the magic of a cure. And I want people to get away from the idea of there being a magic wand that's going to come down and just plunk, get rid of ataxia. So how was I going to do this? Because when I think of magic, I think of that. I think of a magic wand and that we're pulling a treatment out of a hat. And that's not going to happen. So I want to dispel that notion. So it's not going to be simple. We are going to have to work on this. And so I really had a puzzle of how are we going to talk about this? How can I give you something that is in sync with the NAF's decision to call this the magic of cure? But as I thought about it more, I realized that there are other kinds of magic. There are types of magic that really require skill and dedication and education and hard work. Types of magic that you have to go to institutions of higher learning to achieve. Types of magic where you have to work with esteemed, internationally recognized professors in order to get the skills you need, in order to bring these things forward. They're magic schools of medicine that really bring things together, that test things in a laboratory, that allow you to develop treatments that really can go forward. So I think there is a magic, maybe a magic from the esteemed potions professor that will allow us to move this forward. And I think that's the image that I want to leave you with, is that we need magic. We definitely need some magic. We need some good luck. We need things to fall into place. But it has to be along with good work. Severus Snape could not come up with a potion that really worked, a transfiguration potion or a polyjuice potion or whatever those things were, if he didn't have all the right ingredients. He couldn't do it. You couldn't make the stuff if you didn't have all of the right ingredients. So what are the ingredients that we need to make that ataxia treatment potion? What do we need to really move this to the next level? Well, as I said, we need to know the diagnosis. We need to put that in the pot. We need to know what that disease is about. We need to characterize it. We need to know how to control the disease today. I'm glad to see the cystic fibrosis is now, we're getting some education from them with the new development officer joining the NAF, because no one has done more towards learning how to control and manage disease than the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And if we can institute that knowledge into the NAF and our approach in our multiple centers around the country, we're going to be better off for it. In addition to management, we need to find the treatments. There needs to be a treatment discovery arm. There needs to be a way of evaluating the treatments. Are these things actually working? And we need to have some means of seeing whether or not that treatment has an impact clinically. So these are all the ingredients we need in order to move forward, to push them to stir the pot a little bit and develop the real magic of developing an ataxia treatment. But if you look on the shelf, we don't have all these things necessarily available. We have to actually go out and make the components for this magic to occur. So that's what we've been hearing about during this really exciting several days that we've been down here in Orlando. Is there a progress towards each of these elements of developing an ataxia treatment? So is there progress in terms of diagnosis? Well, we've heard a lot. So David Lynch talked with us about the importance of genetic diagnosis of FA, which is largely straightforward, though we continue to learn new things that we can do to clarify that. So we've got that in the pot. That looks like we're making accomplishments there. But we heard also from Vikram about new means of testing. No longer do you have to pick an individual gene to test or a panel of genes, each of which costs $1,000. Now, as Dr. Wilmot was also reviewing today, we can do that with $1,000 or $2,000 to test all of them. So that increasingly we've got the ability to do that, and also to find additional genes through things like exome sequencing. We also heard from Dr. Khurana about the importance of still diagnosing things clinically. So it's very important to realize that there still are a lot of patients that don't have a genetic diagnosis. They definitely have ataxia, and we need to characterize them. There are new ways of characterizing patients with MRI scans, with MRS scans, with different imaging approaches, with new clinical insights that allow us to get to a deeper understanding of the disease, even if we do not know the genetic mechanism. An incredibly important aspect of what goes on here, and all of that is now available to us as well. Dr. Perlman and Dr. Wilmot each also spoke about different means of diagnosing. My one point on this would be you need to have a real good guide when you get into this. If you're getting into genetic testing, you need to know who you're working with. You need to have oftentimes a genetic counselor who can help you steer clear of the potential downside of genetic testing. You need to have somebody who can help you avoid the pitfalls and road bumps in something like exome sequencing. Exome sequencing is not a foolproof, straightforward, or necessarily simple approach at all. There are oftentimes confusing signs and sometimes some important issues that do not come up at all. So I think you need to work with an expert when you get into this, but all of that is available to us, so I think we have made a lot of progress. We have room to improve, but we have more and better diagnoses available to us. What about those other elements that we need? Do we understand the biology of ataxia? We heard from Dr. Khurana yesterday about the relationship of MSA and Parkinson's disease, a very, very exciting move forward in terms of understanding both, and that opens up to us some other colleagues with whom we can work to try to understand this disease better. It also raises the point that has been brought up in other forms of spinal cerebellar ataxia of protein folding. One of the key elements of certain forms of ataxia, how does that relate to other things that are going on? We will hear from Dr. Oz. Yes, I made these slides up last night, so this is anticipating her talk, but she will talk a little bit more about the people that participated in the early part of the week who brought all kinds of new insights to us from around the world in terms of understanding ataxia in cells, animals, and people. We heard more from David Lynch about the effects of frataxin, its role in affecting the energy production in cells, the role in mitochondria, and things that might be targets for us as we develop treatments. We also heard from Hank Paulson and Lauren Moore about stem cells, how we can use stem cells to understand the disease. We always think about stem cells in their therapeutic approach, but really the value of stem cells to us immediately, the value right now, is what they can teach us. And so they're teaching us a lot, not only about what is causing ataxia, but they provide a very rich way in which we can assess treatment approaches. Harry Orr talked about the role of the NAF in pushing these all forward and helping us understand the value of getting new investigators into the field. As I said, we have a lot of work ahead of us. I want you to be excited. We have tremendous excitement about some of the approaches coming down the pike, but this is going to be something we need to keep working on for years to come, and we can only do that if we excite new people to the field, and we are. So Chip, again, discussed some of the common elements of spinal cerebellar ataxia, and we're finding out several things that look like great targets for disease. By understanding what's going on at the molecular and cellular level, we can identify potential targets, either in protein folding, what modifies and straightens out those proteins so that they fold normally, calcium overload within cells, differences in RNA processing. There's several key elements that might be common to multiple ataxias, so that if you have spinocerebellar ataxia 29, there might not be an active research program for that, but we might be able to learn things from these common elements that will impact you and others with other of the rare forms of ataxia. So by understanding the ataxias better, we can do more to come up with better treatments because we do understand those underlying mechanisms. What about those other elements of treatment? If we come to assess treatments in patients, we need to make sure that we're comparing patients that look pretty similar to one another. One of the key elements of clinical research studies is that we'll give one group of patients a new treatment and we'll compare them to a group of patients that do not get the treatment. Well, if that's going to work, we need to have patients that look pretty similar to one another when we start. And so not all people will be involved in all studies. We will have to select people so that we have a group that is pretty similar from the treatment arm to the placebo arm. And we can only do that if everybody is getting the same high degree of optimized treatment to start with. So we heard from Jennifer Miller yesterday about the importance of exercise, and we've heard more about it today, but one key point she made was that if you exercise on improving your balance, that will improve your gait. And I think that's the kind of key piece that we need to latch onto and take home with us. We also heard about the importance of navigating SSI and SSDI. My one take-home message here is to not give up. I am confident that the Social Security Administration has a room at least this size filled up with people whose sole job is to open up envelopes and stamp denied on it and send it back to you. And that's the first, second, or third hurdle that you've got to get past. So go into it fully aware that you're going to have to do that. It's part of the process. And so don't be discouraged. Keep fighting. You'll get there. But get some expert advice along the way so that you can make it happen. So this is all part of making sure that people are getting the care they need. We heard from Ellen about the importance of riding the wave, of not letting ataxia have control over your thought process or over your spirit, and to not be inundated by that, but that was even made more poignant, I think, by Nigel, who gave a very touching testimonial yesterday to his experience with ataxia and the point of learning how to fight ataxia, but to not fight yourself, to accept yourself and to allow yourself to wholeheartedly fight the condition, as we all are interested in doing. Nancy just gave us an important discussion on the supportive devices that are important and novel communication devices. One of my patients at Stanford is a software engineer at Google. And she has lost control of her arms and legs and cannot speak anymore, but fortunately for her, still has excellent control of her eyes. And so she has worked at Google to modify. She's still working. She is in a power wheelchair. She can manipulate with her thumb, and then she communicates with this device that she uses her eyes for. That she has written new software in order to do in just a remarkable way of branching logic on her screen, where I can talk with her almost in real time as she directs her eyes onto the screen and controls the voice output of the computer. It's really a remarkable scene, but it's something that's coming in the future as we get more and more sophisticated in types of supportive devices. So all of these are important so that we can keep people as active and engaged in participating fully. And of course, we heard from the great Susan Perlman this morning about all of the things that go into this. I'll just add a few points. I really emphasized, as she pointed out, the importance of sleep. I think sleep is all too often, especially in this culture, overlooked and not taken seriously enough, and I think we need to focus on the importance of a good night's sleep. And there are many ways that ataxia can interfere with that, and they can oftentimes be treated or at least minimized so you can have more energy during the day. The importance of exercise has been pushed. But in terms of nutrition, I want to talk a little bit about feeding tubes. I think that we haven't done a good enough job of dispelling the anxieties and concerns around feeding tubes. We've gotten into this in several of the birds of a feather groups, but I think that nobody is born wishing they had a feeding tube. But I think that the technology has improved so much that they really can be a godsend to a lot of people who have swallowing difficulties. They can help you maintain your nutrition. You can still eat anything you can eat safely so that they do not preclude in any way your eating, but allow you to maintain your nutrition, to maintain your hydration. It's another way of getting medication. It really is something that a lot more people are benefiting from today than were 10 or certainly 20 years ago. So I think there's a lot more we can do, but again, all of this has now become much more available so that we can make sure that we're providing excellent care for all patients with ataxia, which is a critical step for us being able to test new treatments in the future. So are there promises of treatments? Well, we've heard of several. Hank Paulson and Lauren Moore talked, first of all, about stem cells not being quite ready for prime time. There are studies going forward. It needs to be done in a research realm. We need to understand what they do, how they do it, before spending a lot of money. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are available around the world to give you something called stem cells. I'm not always sure what they are. But I advise you to check into it very cautiously, and as I usually tell people, to not use all of your resources to follow that possibility. Resources being money, but also being time and energy, that you need to pick and choose what you spend your time, energy, and money on and make sure it's worthwhile. I will give a testimonial to the ASOs. You've heard about them. It is a term that I think is worth keeping in your memory, because I think there is a future for this. We treated the very first infant with a different condition, spinal muscular atrophy, at Stanford now 3 years ago. She was 6 months of age when we treated her, already severely affected, would have died unquestionably within months. But with the antisense treatment, and Lauren and Hank talked about this spinal muscular atrophy treatment, but that young girl is now 3.5 years of age. She did not die. She got stronger. She can move her arms and legs and breathe, and now is in a power wheelchair and living a life. And so I do have optimism about this. There, as I said, many things that need to be worked out to make sure that these things get ready for all the conditions that we think might be amenable to them. David Lynch has talked about different forms of energy production that can improve Friedreich's ataxia and different approaches along those lines, but also talked about gene replacement therapy, as did Chip earlier today. And I think that that is a very exciting field. It's also moving forward in several other conditions, and there's no reason to think that we can't do that for many forms of the ataxia as well. As I say, Chip talked about the increasing efforts towards treatment discovery and the increasing ease of diagnosis. And these things come together. So as we understand the diseases better, we know what's causing them, we can really focus on coming up with new treatments. And there are several things, either repurposing drugs that are currently available, or coming up with gene replacement therapy, or gene modification approaches that we are really quite optimistic about. So a number of these things are recurrent, but I already mentioned Vikram's talking about the importance of understanding the role of protein folding in both Parkinson's disease and MSA, which is, as we know, a non-genetic, or at least we don't understand the genetic component of it, form of ataxia and movement disorder. So we have a number of different approaches that Dr. Uz will continue to discuss in the next talk now, but with evolving treatments using new or repurposed drugs. So a lot is in the pipeline. So we do think that we are getting close to having real treatments. But then this is why you need to understand the complexity, not just of the ataxias, but of our combating them. Because if we have a treatment, we can't just say it looks good. We can't just say that it works in mice. We have to prove that it works in people. And in order to do that, we have to take, again, a multifaceted approach. So Hank and Lauren talked about the importance of having a biobank so that we can come up with biomarkers. David Lynch has also developed a biobank of tissue from Friedreich's patients and is using those as well as clinical scales so that we can test these things. Chip talked about the role of ataxia scales, the importance of having tissue that's available so that we can test these things. Dr. Millar talked yesterday about the role of specific testing of movements. So some of us have very fancy laboratories where we can assess gait or assess movements. Those might be a very, very valuable tool for us to see whether or not a treatment looks like it's working. So all of these things are coming into play, and Dr. Uz, I'm sure, will tell you some of the exciting things that she's doing herself at the University of Minnesota to look at brain structure and function in ways that correlates it with neuropsychological testing as well as with other forms of brain function, working with Dr. Schmaumann and others to come up with measures that really show additional ways in which the ataxias affect central nervous system function. So all of these things, too, are coming together so that we can better quantify ataxia, which is a key element of our being able to prove whether or not our treatments work. So all of these things are in the pot. We do have improved ingredients. We continue to work on these ingredients so that we can better work together to achieve what we're looking for, which is finding a treatment for these various forms of ataxia, but we can't do any of it. We can't do any of it without two additional important ingredients, the first of which is you. So I appreciate your all being here. That is a huge, huge, huge first step, and it is only by working with the patients and families that we can achieve anything. So I encourage you to sign up for the registry, to join the NAF, to do what you can to stay in touch. Not all patients can participate in all research studies. It just doesn't work that way. We have to be selective. We have to choose the people that are going to work with us to find the answers that we're looking for. But only by having a lot of people involved can we do a lot. So I commend you. I applaud you for being here. It's been great meeting so many of you, and I hope we can stay engaged and link arms moving into the future so that we can work together. But the other key ingredient is to have an organization that brings us together. So the National Ataxia Foundation, working with the patients and families, with the investigators, with the clinicians, and developing all these ingredients is what we need in order to develop the treatments that we're all looking for. So take-home messages, yes, ataxia is complicated. I mean, it used to be when I was in medical school, there were only 3 kinds of ataxia. So there was Marie's ataxia, there was Friedreich's ataxia, and then there was OPCA. So those were the primary forms of ataxia, and life has gotten so much more complicated. Except it really hasn't, because life was just as complicated back then, but we didn't know what we were talking about. So now we know a little bit more what we're talking about, and we realize the complexity, but because we understand it better, now we can start to tease it apart and pick these things off one at a time. So it's complicated. There are a number of different forms that we now realize, that we recognize. Each type of ataxia has its own unique effects on nerve cells that we need to understand, and we're working on it. And each person with ataxia needs to work with a sophisticated team of clinicians. This is not something that can be treated solely by your primary care physician. We need to come up with teams. So yes, ataxia is complicated. But at the same time, I really, really want you to be more optimistic than ever before, because I think having come to these meetings now for whatever 15 years, I've seen it progress just amazingly. And the speed of change is increasing. Ataxia can now be diagnosed much, much more clearly, more simply, and that's going to continue. We're going to see improvements continuing over the upcoming months and years. The basic and clinical scientists are working together in a phenomenally exciting way. The first part of this week demonstrated that better than anything, and there are promising treatments in the pipeline. So I leave you with that thought that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I again commend you and thank you for being here. It's only by working with you that we can accomplish anything, and only by working with the NAF that we can indeed begin to find the magic of a cure. So thank you very much.